On a different side of that spectrum would be my Chicago Cubs, who until last week were the only Major League Ball club that had failed to make any free agent moves or trades this offseason. Out of all 30 teams, 29 had made some sort of moves, and Cubs had not until
Boo-boo.
I would say a curiously timed signing. It has to do with Shota Imanaga's posting from the Nippon League in Japan. That had to be resolved this past week. So I guess that timing makes sense. But it's also well timed for Jed Hoyer and the Cubs, as the Cubs convention was this past weekend. Imanaga's signing was officially done Thursday, as CubsCon started on Friday. A splashy move, I guess, until you kind of look deeper into it. He's really a number 3 starter when it comes down to it. He's had one of the best pitchers in Japan over his 8-year career. There's no doubting that. But kind of a junk ball pitcher, lefty, 30-year-old lefty. Sits 91, 94.
Yeah.
Fastball. Crazy movement. He's got plenty of stuff, I guess you'd say, but just not a fireballer. It's interesting because it sounds like he wanted to come to Chicago as much as Chicago wanted him, because he's been in the city for months now. He's been at Blackhawks games, and I don't know if he has an apartment or what's going on, but people were seeing him around Chicago back in November even. So he was dying to come
at the
here.
Starbucks.
That famous Starbucks.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of makes sense that he really wanted to be here. When you look at the deal they signed, that's another confusing thing. I've seen it characterized as a 4-year, $53 million deal. I've seen it characterized as a 5-year, $80 million deal. I've seen it also characterized as a 2-year, $30 million deal, because there's I think either a mutual or a club option after 2 years. I think it's a club option, actually, that they can get out of it. So this is I don't think it's a bad move. It's just another in a long line of Jed Hoyer moves that are just underwhelming. Again, it's a big market team making small market moves. This is a shrewd. It's a low risk, high reward deal. They could be off the hook in 2 years and only give up $30 million. Great. Why do we need a rotation full of number 3 starters? Aside from Justin Steele, of course, but
Yeah.
this is the same conversation I was having with myself last season when we signed Jameson Taillon. Well, I thought of him as a number 4 starter at the time. Not a bad signing, but if that's the move you're going to do, a bit underwhelming. Imanaga is a mere replacement at this point for Marcus Stroman, who you can debate the merits of his performance as a Cub. He was brilliant at times, and other times he was injured and not so brilliant. So they're kind of treading water to the point now where, I was complaining last year about Taillon being their number 4 starter. Well, he's the number 2 starter in the rotation at this point. So
yeah,
it's almost like they're going backwards. That wasn't the only little bit of treat for Cubs fans marching through ice and snow to get to CubsCon this weekend. There was a major trade. Hoyer traded for Michael Busch from the Dodgers, number 2 prospect. I looked up. He's at one point at least, he was the number 44 overall prospect in baseball. So certainly nothing to sneeze at. But it seems to be the Cubs' solution for first base, which is interesting, as they have not parted ways, but Cody Bellinger is a free agent to be signed. There's plenty of rumors out there that they may still sign him. Even if they do, that would be, pretty much status quo. I guess Busch could move over to third base, which I don't believe he's played very much of that in the minors in his career. So, but again, Busch is a total wild card. He's a top prospect, but he's never done it at the major league level. People are comparing him to the idea of bringing Matt Mervis up last year, and that certainly failed. Um, so it's just another in a long line of curious moves, not very bold moves like your Giants are making. It's I've keep saying it over again. The Cubs are confusing activity for accomplishment.
Right.
I was gonna make that joke, 2 weeks ago when may have done this podcast earlier. They were gonna thwart that idea by not doing anything. So how can you accuse
we're
confusing activity for accomplishment if you have no activity?
we're
But
going we're going with a different direction this year. We're
I
keeping
mean,
the team status quo.
he checkmated me again. Damn you, Hoyer. But instead, they have made a couple moves, but it's the same thing. Just acting a big market team, acting like a small market. I was being generous last week, calling them a middle market team. That narrative, which I believe is true, it's not just some crackpot podcaster like me espousing that. Those questions are coming directly to Jed Hoyer now. That's one of the best things that came out of CubsCon this weekend. He was asked directly why this perception of the Cubs acting like a small market team. And to my astonishment, Jed Hoyer embraces that. He literally, I've got the quote here. Let me read this. Jed was asked about being labeled as having a small market mentality. Quote, I think that's what we want to have. We want to
Oh,
find value.
oh God.
Yeah, that's fine. I can't argue with wanting to find value, but to have a small market mentality is ridiculous. And I would call it disingenuous, but it's not because he's telling you exactly what they're doing. He also did point out that they have the ability to sign the Swansons of the world too, but you don't want to be profligate with your money. Everyone had to go run to their dictionaries to look up what profligate means. Of course, it just means reckless. But to that on Twitter, I responded with the definition of commensurate. I think your spending should be commensurate with your vast resources. And that has been the crux of my argument all along. This is a major market team
God.
pretending that they need to find value everywhere instead of splashing cash around that recklessly. That's not what I want either. I do want them to find value. Everybody does. But to continually finish in third place in these free agent, sweepstakes, as we
Yeah, I mean,
discussed last show.
we talked about it with the White Sox last show that if they had just gone out with, after the 2020 season and Reinsdorf had actually opened the pocketbooks and brought in like 2 or 3 like veteran, real big money free agent guys.
They never made the big move.
They would have made. They probably, you could argue that they probably would have won a World Series, right? At least gone.
I would not.
But you would have because you picked them. But but they would have made it out of the first round of the playoffs at least. Let's say that. Let's agree on that.
I can agree to that. Yes.
Let's agree to that. So, like, you look at the Cubs now, and while the World Series taste is a little less removed than the White Sox, they are basically acting like the freaking White Sox do right now, and it blows my mind. It's like someone like Ricketts started having dinners with Reinsdorf, and it was like, it's just wild to me. Like,
maybe the Cubs will move to Nashville. That'll be the next bombshell.
I mean, it's like Jed Hoyer's auditioning to be the next White Sox GM. He's like, I mean,
yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, to your point on at first, the signing of what's it, Imanaga, I was like, oh, that seems like a pretty good move. But then, like I started reading up on the guy, and like Baseball Prospectus has him as like a 4 or 5 starter in Major League Baseball.
Oh, yeah, I've seen 3. That's what I've been
characterizing. And he allowed 17 homers in last year.
That's the part I forgot to bring up. Yeah, he
Yeah,
doesn't walk anybody, which is great. But he is prone to giving up homers, and that's uh I forget how it works. That's hard to know how that translates just because the ballpark size is different. I think most are in
yeah,
domes in Japan, so it's hard to say how that will translate. But you to your point, and we're both making it. It's an underwhelming signing.
yeah,
It's cool. It's fine if that's your third or fourth move of the offseason, not your first splashy move. And you know, you brought up the World Series. The Cubs need to be contending for a World Series every season. And the
yeah,
way they are acting, the frugality and the being so careful with their money and their ideas is just going to be eternally frustrating. And that's why I'm happy that these questions are coming directly to Jed Hoyer now through the regular media.
right.
Why are you acting like a small market team? That's the funny part. They're even going for the jugular. I was being
You're
uh
saying mid-market at
I
least.
was yeah, I think I was being generous just calling him a mid-market. My caustic podcasting blogger mentality wasn't even caustic enough apparently. So these questions are now out there and are going to be continued to be asked. So I love that part of it. Maybe it'll actually light a fire under their ass and get them to do something. There are free agents still out there. There's still time. Like we just talked about with the Giants. Bellinger, I've talked about this. I don't want to sign him to a long term deal. Sounds like those long term deals are not out there for he and Scott Boras to have because he is still yet to sign. I'm not against Bellinger coming back for a short amount of time, but the main reason I was against it earlier is because he's demanding a 6-7 year deal, and there's just no way I'm going to give that guy that kind of time and money. But if they can get him for 2 or 3 years, that's a different story. Again, we're still treading water because he was, their best offensive player for 5 months last year. That would just be replacing him with himself. So it's not that the
Yeah,
Cubs are improving necessarily.
and to your point, like you pointed out, to your point that you pointed out, I'm going to say point a bunch of times right now.
We're hungover.
To your point about him, everyone catching on that he can't hit a freaking fastball. I mean, you wonder um, what this season's really going to look like for him. Is it going to be is the reason he hasn't signed, to your point, the long-term deal isn't there because everyone's a little sketchy that he's going to be able to repeat what he did for
Absolutely.
last year. So
I have to give Jed some credit here as I browbeat him to death. He's playing the long game. If there's no one bidding for Cody Bellinger, why would the Cubs be
yeah,
bidding
right,
against themselves? So
exactly,
you know, he,
100%.
he's he could be just playing the long game, and I'm sure that is what he's doing. It's just frustrating to watch this for 2 years straight, the same types of moves, and to have them finally admit this is exactly what they're doing. This is their plan. Again, they could still go after another starter. We already mentioned Blake Snell, reigning Cy Young Award winner, National League. Issues with him. I think he doesn't want to be anywhere but the West Coast, but he also doesn't get out of the sixth inning.
Yeah,
As
100%. And
as
that
good
that
as he was, he doesn't pitch deep. I think he only pitched
no,
180 innings last year.
no, you
Those were
definitely have to have
fantastic.
a bullpen if he's your starter.
Yeah, and yeah, so I'm a little dubious there. The move I would love to see, and I think would make a ton of sense on many levels, is Josh Hader. Secure the back end of the bullpen. He's coming off a fantastic year, 35 saves, mid one ERA, low one WHIP season. Obviously, is the former connection with Cubs manager Craig Counsell. He was asked about that at CubsCon this weekend, and he said they have a good relationship. I think that would make sense. Hader is 30 years old. I think that's the move. It would also be fun just to throw it more in the face of Brewers fans that we are basically taking the best parts of their former franchise, and doing great things with him. Hopefully, I think that would make sense. But there's, again, there's still a lot of work to be done. And Hater again is. I keep thinking the later we get into this off season, deeper into free agency, the deals that Scott Boras and free agents were looking for, mostly long-term deals, are not there. So the longer that this goes, the more, even though it is frustrating, the better it might turn out for the Cubs if they can sign these guys to shorter term deals. Again, I like Hader. I would not sign him to a 4 or 5 year deal that he's probably asking for. I wouldn't sign any reliever to that extent. Even though he's been great and he is turning 30. I think he turns 30 like by opening day. So 2-3 year deal, massive money. I don't care. Give him tons of money. Just don't give him tons of years. That's the kind of thing that'll get me fired up about this off season. So maybe that's what Hoyer has in mind. I guess we can only hope.
Word Hole Media.